snacks in hand. The vibe is set. And once I start, don't eat too much because you got to stay fun. But come on, bestie, yeah. Hi, bestie boo. I missed you. You want to go get your snack? You know it's time, right? Your gardening essentials too, okay? Okay. Uploaded a new compilation on YouTube today. So if you want to watch my story times in long form while you clean, go to the gym, whatever, go to my YouTube. Don't watch nobody else's because they making money off of me. Anyways, let's get on with the story. Take of the story, let's call this girl Jasmine. Jasmine does DoorDash. And this is an experience that almost made her quit. If she didn't need the money, she would have quit that night. Oh, it's a regular day. She's doing DoorDash. She gets a pickup. She goes, she picks up the food, she goes to the address. She looks at the app. It says, leave at door, right? Her favorites. She don't even like meeting people anyway. But while she's on the way to that house, she gets a phone call from the customer. And the customer says, hey, I know it says leave at the door, but I'm going to need you to hand it to me. She's like, okay, yeah, sure. No problem. That's my job anyway, right? So she continues to drive there. She gets there. She parks. She picks up her DoorDash stuff and she's heading towards the door. And she sees someone standing at the door waiting for her. Again, nothing seems odd. Nothing seems bad, you know? Except as she's walking up the porch, she realizes literally in front of said front door, there's that sign, that circle thing. I forgot what you call it. I think it's called a pentacle, but it's that circle with the star in the middle. And again, if she's able to submit this story, that means she follows me. But even if she didn't follow me, she knows about that stuff, you know? So she sees it and she kind of stops. And the person is just like looking at her. And it's this older, creepy looking guy. And he's just looking at her like, hurry up. Well, she still stops there and she's looking down and looking at him. She's like, hey, I'm not comfortable going over there. Could you like come? I'll give it to you from right here. He's like, why can't you just walk up and give it to me? And that's all she needed to hear. Because, bitch, if you wanted this food, you would have came down and got this shit. There's a reason why you want me to walk up them steps. And I ain't doing it. Not me. And so she repeats herself. She's like, I'm really not comfortable walking up there. I'm not comfortable with this sign that's on the floor. So could you please come and get your food from right here? And he starts to get a little irritated. He's like, bro, just give me my food. Just give me my food. And then she remembered that on the app, it says leave at the door. So she's like, I don't need to walk up there. I could just place this food right here, take a picture, and go about my day. So that's exactly what she does. She places the food down, and she's about to take the picture, and the guy peeps what she's doing. And so he started going off like, I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. She's like, why would you report me if your food is right here? You can get your food. So immediately, she pulls her phone out, and she starts to record him. And as she's recording him, she started to notice that in the camera, there's a shadow behind him. When she looks up at him, there's no shadow, but when she looks into the phone camera, there is a shadow behind him. So she's like, hell no, I'm going back to the car because she done already took the picture and everything like that. She's walking back. And he immediately starts apologizing like, I'm sorry. I'm just very irritated. Like, I'm hungry. I just wanted my food. Here, I have a tip for you. And he pulls out a $50 bill. He's like, here, this is yours. Just come get it. And so Jasmine look at him like, you must think I'm fucking stupid. You must think I got stupid written on my forehead or something. So she starts speed walking to her car. And as she's speed walking, she realizes that he's also walking towards her car. And as she's realizing that, she also realized there had been someone standing on the side of the house, but towards the back the entire time. At this point, she is like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. She's shitting bricks. She don't know what this is, but she knows it's not good. So she don't even speed walk no more. She took it. Thank goodness she had left her car running, so she didn't have to turn it on or anything like that. When she started running, he also started running, and that guy that was on the side of the house also started running too. She gets in the car and she takes off. At this point, she's hyperventilating, like I can't even talk. She's crying, just know like she's freaking out. And once she gets far enough, she calls the cops. Told the cops what happened, gave the cops the address. She called DoorDash, told DoorDash what happened, told DoorDash that she called the cops. After she does all that, she immediately starts praying, right? And then she heads home. The next day, the cops call her back to give her a follow-up. Why did the cops tell Jasmine that nobody's living in that house? Not only did they tell Jasmine that, they told Jasmine they didn't see what sign she was talking about. Went on that front porch and everything, there was that creepy sign. It was not there. And nobody lives in that house. Till this day, Jasmine don't know what that's about, but she knows that it was absolutely real. Because if it wasn't, how would somebody be able to order DoorDash? Of course, DoorDash didn't do anything about it. Yeah, till this day, she never actually got answers. What do y'all think happened in the comments? Y'all already know what I think happened. I don't even need to explain it. Personally, I think Jasmine should get my ebook so she could cleanse herself from that situation. Because you never know. But don't forget to tell me what you was eating in the comments. And don't forget to head over to my YouTube to watch, the compilations. Oh, and I dropped the song today. So if you want to check that out, you can. Okay, bestie, I love you. Bye.
Thought moving into a historic Salem apartment with my boyfriend and my baby would be cute and normal until my landlord gave me a burlap sack he told me was for protection and told me about a room in the basement that I was never supposed to enter. This is Violet's submission to Spooky Scary Storytime, and forewarning, it is a creepy one, it's a wild one, it's a long one, so buckle in. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series of allegedly true, listener-submitted stories about the most unsettling things people have ever experienced. And Violet says her story begins in 2013 when she was in her mid-20s and she was living with her then-boyfriend Raul and their 6-month-old son. And the unit they were renting was part of a triplex. They were renting the middle unit, and above them lived the landlord named Archie, and below them the unit was vacant. Violet says she was living in Salem, Massachusetts for about 10 years at the time that they moved into this apartment, and she was very well versed in the city's somewhat creepy history and the urban legends that come with living in Salem, but she was not prepared for the next 9 months. And so as they're moving into this unit, which they had found online, they meet Archie, the landlord, and he's outside and he greets them and he asks if they would need any help carrying in any boxes. But they politely declined and they said, no, it's fine. We have family that's helping us. And off he went back to his unit. Had no further interaction with him that day until later that night. The sun had gone down and their family had left from helping them move, and Violet was in her son's nursery soothing him to sleep when she heard a knock at the door. She heard Raul answer and could hear a brief exchange of voices, but not wanting to leave her son, she waited until her son had fallen asleep to go out into the living room. And she asked Raul who was at the door, and he said, oh, it was Archie, the landlord. He dropped off a welcome gift. He motioned to a burlap bag on the coffee table, and Violet said, well, what's in it? And he said, I don't know, I haven't looked yet. Violet picked up the bag and noticed that it was very lightweight, and when she looked inside, she found only 2 things. One was a faded piece of paper. On the paper was a hand-drawn image. It was a circle, and inside the circle were an intricate pattern of geometric lines, and around the border of the circle was something written in a foreign language. With the paper was a tarnished coin that was tightly wrapped in thread with 3 knots. It was a foreign currency, and she had absolutely no idea where it had come from, but she was exhausted, and though she found it incredibly bizarre, she just was too tired to go and ask Archie about it. So she made a mental note to ask him about it the next time she saw him. People went to bed, but all throughout the night, they woke up because they thought they heard their son crying. But every time they entered his nursery, he would be fast asleep. And tossing and turning all night, Violet had a number of very bizarre, abstract dreams, which she attributed to the move and sleeping in an unfamiliar place. Because of the disruption in her sleep cycles, though, she was unable to get any real rest and ended up getting up for good before the sun rose. And noticing that her baby was still asleep, she figured it was a great time to do some laundry. And she started getting some things together before heading into the laundry room, which was in the basement of the triplex. And as she was about to walk out the door, she heard Raul call out from the bedroom behind her, and he said, oh, I forgot to tell you, when Archie stopped by earlier to drop off the welcome gift, he told me to tell you never to go into the room beneath the stairs in the basement. I thought, whatever, it's probably storage, and headed downstairs. And as she entered the basement, she flipped on the switch and noticed that the basement was incredibly dark as it was. There was only one singular bulb lighting up the whole room. She noticed that there was another source of light, which was a soft red glow coming from beneath the crack of the door of the room underneath the stairs, the one that she was instructed not to enter. Thought it was odd, but finished loading her laundry, and as she did, she heard a creak of the back door and thought it must be Archie going outside. Started the washing machine and headed out back to catch him and hopefully ask him about the burlap sack that he had left at their apartment the night before. And she found him in the backyard smoking a cigarette, and so she said, I don't mean to be weird, but I opened the welcome gift you left us, and what is it exactly? He chuckled and he said, oh, don't worry about it. It's just a tradition for protection that I give to all of my tenants when they move into the building. He says in retrospect she should have probably asked protection from what, but she didn't and just thought that he was a little strange, and she headed inside. She re-entered her unit. She looked at the burlap sack and thought it was strange, but also probably rude to throw away, and so she just chucked it in a cabinet underneath the kitchen sink. The next few weeks, Raul and Violet would constantly wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of their son crying, but then anytime they checked on him, he was asleep, and they thought this was weird. It was a shared dream, maybe. Also noticed the scent of wet soil all throughout their apartment, and they could not find the source of it. And one morning they woke up and found the burlap sack that had previously been stored underneath the sink back on their coffee table, and this immediately gave Violet the creeps. Neither she nor Raul admitted to moving it. She decided, because it gave her a bad feeling, that she was going to get rid of it, but she didn't want to throw it in the trash in case Archie found it and was insulted that she threw away his welcome gift. So she put it in her car and waited until she had another opportunity to dispose of it. And one night she drove through some boatyards and thought this was the perfect opportunity, and she threw it over the side of a bridge. And she said, in retrospect, she would never litter in the ocean now, but don't worry, because it came back. The night she got rid of it was by far the most terrifying night that she's ever had in her life, because she says as she was cooking dinner, out of her peripheral vision, she caught the sight of someone crouched behind her dining table. For a split second, she caught the sight of a pale forehead and some gray hair. She turned her head, expecting the sight to just be a trick of the light, but she was horrified to see that it didn't move. She could still distinctly see the top of someone's head. With the lighting, though, and because the chairs were all pushed in, she couldn't make out a body behind the table, and so she screamed. Cole came in from the living room to the dining room and flipped on the light as he did, and as he did, the forehead disappeared. Told him what she saw, but he said it must have just been shadows. But that night, again, she had horrible, abstract dreams, and she was ultimately awoken to the sound of their front door violently rattling. She sat up in bed and looked at the clock and noticed that it was just past 3 in the morning, and she woke Raul up, and he heard it too. It sounded like someone was trying to break in, and so Raul jumped up and he ran into the living room, but the second he crossed the threshold from the bedroom into the living room, the door stopped rattling. He opened the door and looked out into the hall, but there was no one there. And she says Raul was convinced that it was the wind, but she was convinced that it was Archie. They were both freaked out, but ultimately couldn't do anything else but go back to sleep. And this part of the story, she says, still makes her sick to think about to this day. About an hour or two after going back to bed, Raul and Violet were woken up again to the sound of their son crying, but this time it was for real. They noticed that her bedroom door, which they had closed, was now open, and in the threshold sat their 6-month-old son. He was not walking and unable to get out of his crib on his own at that point, and she had no idea how was now sitting in their doorway screaming his little head off. She picked him up, and she could tell that he wasn't hurt, but he was terrified by something. She couldn't come up with any logical explanation as to how her door had opened or how her son was sitting in the middle of the door frame, except for that someone had been in their apartment. That part still disturbed her to this day, but she was afraid that if she were to ask or accuse Archie, she would look insane, because he hadn't done anything up until this point that would indicate that he had been in their apartment. But then they noticed that things around their apartment started going missing. And the scratching started, and it sounded like it was coming from the hallway just outside their front door, and at first she was convinced it was rodents. Then, as she listened night after night, she noticed that the scratching was too calculated and followed certain rhythms and patterns. One night, again unable to sleep, she got enough courage to go out to the living room and look through the peephole in the front door to see if she could see what was making that scratching sound. Ahead of her was a wall, and next to the wall was the set of stairs that disappeared behind the wall down to the main entry to the triplex. As she looked at the wall, she started to make out what seemed to be a figure peeking out from behind the wall, staring at her unit. All she could see was a pale forehead, a skinny hand, and part of one eye. As she stared at it, dumbfounded and trying to make out what this thing was, she said it felt oppressive and evil and like a vacuum of misery. Felt like she couldn't breathe, and as she started to hyperventilate, she felt a hand on her back, and she turned around, and there stood Raul, and he also looked horrified. He asked if she was okay and seemed very concerned and confused, and told her that he had just woken up to the sound of her voice, but when he opened his eyes, she wasn't beside him. He said, "I heard you laughing in bed next to me, but then I also heard a male voice." She said, "I wasn't in the bedroom. I was out here, and I just saw something outside our front door." And she started to explain what she had seen, but it was around 4 a.m. at this point, and when he looked out, there was nothing there. And so they decided to get their baby and make a makeshift bed in the living room until the morning came. This is part 2 of the room in the basement that my landlord told me never to enter. After Violet saw the creepy figure peeking out at her from the hallway, and Raul complained of waking up to her laughing, the couple decided to make a makeshift bed in their living room and sleep with the lights on until morning came. It was another night of tossing and turning, and she wasn't able to put the creature from the hallway out of her mind. And so around 6 a.m., she just said, you know what, screw it. And she sat up and decided she was going to make some coffee and get up for the day. But as she sat up, she noticed that the burlap sack that she had thrown off the bridge into the ocean was now sitting back on her coffee table. She was mortified, but now she was angry because this meant that someone absolutely had been in her apartment. And so she ripped the burlap sack open, and inside was the same piece of paper with the strange drawing and the weird foreign coin that was wrapped in thread, but now there was a third object. Also inside the burlap sack was a small jar, and inside the jar was about a tablespoon's worth of black ash. She noticed that the bag, as well as the bag's contents, were completely dry. There was no sign that they had ever been in the ocean. And so now she was sure that this must be a replica bag. And she grabbed it and she stormed upstairs to Archie's apartment. And even though it was 6 in the morning, she was sure that he had something to do with it. And she banged on the door. And the second she started banging on the door, he opened it instantly, like he had been waiting for her. And then she stood there because she said she hadn't planned out what she was going to say. And he just stared at her for a minute. And finally she said, "What did you put in my apartment? Why do you keep putting this bag in my unit?" Archie didn't say anything. He just continued staring at her. And so she got louder and she said, "You need to explain to me what is going on." He started to shove the burlap sack and its contents into his hands. And she says, "I don't want this thing. Take it back. Whatever it is. I'm not sure what you're trying to pull here." And then he said, "Oh, so you saw it." She said she felt her face go white, and she knew that he must have known about the creature that she saw in the hallway. And then he proceeds to tell her that the burlap sack was from protection from whatever that thing was. She tells him that she threw it in the ocean and it reappeared, and he said, "You should have never gotten rid of it because now that thing got closer to you." This terrified Violet, and then she asked him, "Well, have you ever come into my apartment? Did you put this back?" And he denied ever having entered their unit. Part of her wishes that she had never gone up to his unit, because then she could have kept this creature in her head and kept telling herself that she had imagined it. But now Archie was confirming to her that whatever she saw was real. He told her, just keep it in your apartment and that thing won't be able to touch you. And then he stopped and seemed to listen to something that she couldn't hear and suddenly rushed her out. He said, "You need to go back to your unit now. I'll explain more later, I promise." Violet, still terrified and not knowing what to do, reluctantly took the sack back to her unit and threw it back underneath the kitchen sink. The next several weeks, she looked for Archie in passing. She wanted him to explain what he promised to explain to her about the creature or the protection or whatever explanation he could give her to make her feel better, but he was seldom home. And day after day, things continued to go missing around their unit, and they continued hearing the scratching outside their door at night. Eventually, 6 months went by, and she says she doesn't know how, but she had just sort of gotten used to the scratching and the missing objects. And at this point, she mentioned that she is Indigenous and she grew up on a reservation in Maine. And after about 6 months with no contact from Archie, her cousin, who still lived on the reservation, came to visit. The moment her cousin Bertie walked into their unit, she said, "The energy here feels weird. I'm uncomfortable." And Violet said, "Oh my gosh, if you only knew the half of it." But she didn't feel like getting into it. She didn't want to scare herself by thinking on things that had happened and had come to pass. And the first night Bertie stayed was uneventful. But the second night, Bertie asked, "Hey, can I go do some laundry?" And without thinking, Violet says, "Yeah, the laundry room's in the basement." Sometime later, Bertie comes upstairs and her eyes are all wide and she's like, "I just talked to your creepy neighbor in the basement. Like, man, what a trip that guy is." Thinking Bertie must mean Archie, Violet's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, he's like a trip, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, he looks ancient." And he was just sitting there saying he was keeping watch. And Violet's stomach dropped and she's like, "What are you talking about?" Ancient was not a word that she would use to describe Archie. So she's like, "Wait, who did you talk to?" And Bertie's like, "The guy that lives in the unit below the stairs." Violet's like, "What guy that lives in the room underneath the stairs?" And she's like, "Yeah, I walked down there and the door was open and he was just sitting in the middle of a circle of candles." Bertie said that there was a large symbol drawn on the floor, and when she asked what the man was doing, he just said, "Keeping watch." Bertie was apparently so freaked out by the whole thing that she had said, "Oh, I gotta go back upstairs now and talk to my cousin." And that's when she returned to the unit. And so both girls rushed downstairs and they found the room with the door open. Now all the candles had been put out and were smoldering like someone had just left. And underneath the candle circle on the floor was the same sigil that was drawn onto the piece of paper that Archie had left in the burlap sack in Violet's unit. At this point, Violet said she was completely freaked out and wanted to move out immediately, but their financial situation did not allow them to just pick up and move. So she waited until she saw Archie so she could ask him if he had maybe a friend that was staying in the unit downstairs, but it was another week before she crossed paths with him. She finally saw him, she asked, and he immediately said, "Why?" And she said, "Oh, well, my cousin was in the basement and she came across a man who was sitting inside of a candle circle and she had a little strange interaction with him." And Archie became irate. He shouted at her, he swore at her, and he told her that he had instructed them to never enter that room. He said, "Whatever conversation you had down there was your fault. It was her fault for going in that room when you were explicitly warned not to enter." And Violet said she just apologized profusely. And when she did, she said that he shot her a look that she still remembers. It was like the way a shark looks at prey. It actually scared her and made her afraid of him. And after that, she started hearing the scratching at night more aggressively outside their door. The scratching seemed to move, and it stopped being just outside their unit, and they started hearing it throughout their unit. It was in their son's room, it was in their bedroom, and she began to think of ways that she could handle this. And finally she decided that she was going to take the burlap sack to a magic store in downtown Salem. The store was reputable as far as she knew, and they claimed to sell things related to magic and to spells and to protection. And even though she didn't really know much about it, she wanted to go there with the burlap sack and the items inside to see if they could offer her any explanation. She walked in and saw that there was only one man who was working in the store, and he seemed older, and he listened to her as she told him about everything they had been experiencing. And he said, well, let me see the sack. And he opened it up and he said, oh, this isn't protection. He says this is a domiciliation right. And he begins to tell her that there are some documented traditions in Europe of house spirits or domestic entities that are tied to places, not to people. And this thing that she had, this was not about summoning that entity, this was about feeding it. And he shakes his head and he says, this protection charm is not protecting you, it's protecting the house from losing you. Then tells her that she is unable to break a binding like that, but she is able to relocate it. He told her that the entity was tied to the house and the structure itself, not to the piece of paper or what was in the bag. And he said the way that you would relocate something like this is you would have to find the exact piece of the structure that it was tied to. So that could be a brick or a nail or a piece of the foundation. As far as the ash in the jar went, he said he wasn't sure, but suggested that maybe it was related to the previous tenants and said that they should try to track them down and figure out why they left. For the coin, he told her to bury it somewhere unclaimed, and as far as the sigil went, he told her to add ink to it. He said if she was unable to locate the old tenant, that she should scatter the ashes in running water. And so she did all of that. She added ink to the sigil, she buried the coin in the woods, and she sprinkled the ash in a river in New Hampshire. After all of this, she called her dad and begged him to let her, Raul, and their baby come and stay. And he said, of course you can come and stay. And once they got settled into his house, she explained everything that had been going on. But she said her dad is a skeptic. He believed that Archie had been breaking into the apartment and that Archie had moved their son from his crib into the doorway, that he must have been dressed up and the person peeking around the corner in the hallway, and that he must have known the man in the basement. As far as the thing that peeked at her over the dining table, he said that must have just been a trick of the light and her nerves playing games with her mind. Still, though, all of that was explanation enough for her dad to be convinced to let Violet and her family move in with him permanently, and he went along with them back to the unit so that they could finish packing their things and move out. They were packing up their things. Her dad found scratches in the hallway walls that Violet had never noticed before, and then they noticed that Archie had come out of his unit and was silently watching them pack up their stuff. Violet's dad said he was going to go have a word with him, and she begged him not to because she didn't want to make it weird, but her dad ignored her and marched off to talk to Archie. But as soon as he started talking to Archie, Archie started whistling and retreated back into his unit like he didn't hear a single word. He says they eventually returned their keys through the mailbox in Archie's unit and never saw or heard from him again. They paid their last month's rent through check by mail. And while she wishes she had done more research on the previous tenants, she'll never know what truly was in that house. Whether Archie was in there playing psychological games or whether he was truly channeling something dark, she doesn't care, and she's happy to be out of there. What do you think? Let her know your thoughts. She'll be seeing the comments, and if you have a spooky, scary story you think no one would believe, something crazy, or that still bothers you to this day, please send it in. We would love to hear it.
Snacks in hand, the vibe is set, and once I start, don't eat too much, cause you gotta stay fine. But come on, bestie, it's yes! Hi, my besties. I missed you. What you doing? You wanna go get your snack? You wanna go get your rolling equipment? Okay. Very special announcement. For everybody that's in the Jersey area or New York, we are having a dance workshop and I'm teaching Jersey Club. A 3-day workshop, and on the 3rd day, mindless behavior is gonna be there and they're gonna teach the choreography to Mrs. Wright. No, I didn't stutter. When we dropped the tickets, it was sold out within the hour. Just dropped some more tickets. So if you want to come out, come out. Sorry, second announcement. I'm having another sale. A lot of people missed the last live sale that I did. And so I'm having another one this Friday, same time from 12 to 3. The ebook will be on sale. Won't be for $10 like last time because I can't. But it will be for $15. That is the best I can do. Anyway, on to the story. So for the sake of this story, let's call this guy Jason. Well, Jason's parents are together, right? He grew up in a 2-family household. However, it wasn't one of those 2-family households that was like healthy. It was one of those where he would have been better off. It was just one parent. He kind of like grew up watching how his dad treats his mom, right? And even as a child, like something told him like, I don't know, the way he treats her just don't seem right. However, she stays. Like she just keeps staying. He even like used to be putting hands on her and she like would still stay. And so low-key growing up, he kind of like, he loves his mom, but he kind of low-key had like some kind of resentment for her only because it's like, girl, do you know your worth? Me as a child, I know you shouldn't be dealing with this. I think you should leave, and you just like staying with this man. So as he grew up, when he got older, for a little while, he was really mad at his mom because even after he turned 18 and he left the house, she still stayed. And so at this point, it's like, bro, I'm not even the excuse anymore. Why are you still staying with this man? All of this is happening here in the U.S., right? On his dad's side, someone ended up passing away to where everybody had to go back to their home country. And that's what happened. Everybody went back to their home country. That was bad. Anyway, everybody went back to their home country. So he met a lot of family that he didn't even know he had. Some he kind of remembered. And all of his like favorite cousins and stuff. Anyway, so he's hanging out with his cousins and he's having a blast. You know, the whole family is kind of like in the same area, kind of, but everybody's like spread out. But his dad comes in and tells his mom to go get something for him, but it wasn't on some like, can you please get this for me? It was on some like, bitch, go get that. Except he didn't say bitch, but it was given that, you know? So he visibly like got mad. And his cousins could tell that he got mad. He tried to hide it, but then they asked him about it. They was like, ooh, you mad? He honestly was like, yeah, I'm mad. Like, bro, why? It's like, love my mom, love my dad, but like, why do she stay with him? And like, all of the cousins kind of like were talking about it a little bit. But then one of the cousins was just looking at him like, oh, you don't know. He asked him like, is there something you know that I don't? And the cousin is like, I don't know if it's my place to say it. Jason is like, well, now you gotta tell me. And so the cousin looked at Jason and said, you know your mom like belongs to your dad, right? And Jason's like, well, duh, they're married. And the cousin is like, no, like belong. Like he bought her. Jason is like, what the hell do you mean he bought her? Come to find out, Jason's father indeed bought his mom. He grew up without a dad. She basically like grew up with her mom. However, her mom wasn't the best person in the world. Her mom used to be like out here, like, so very young, his mom kind of learned how to take care of herself because her mom wasn't really taking care of her. If anything, she was like a burden to her mom. And so y'all want to know what her mom did? One of the people she used to be outside with, if you know what I mean, she ended up bringing to the house and he saw her. He knew her mom wasn't shit. So he was like, hey, can I buy her? I want her. She's beautiful. I want her to be my wife. Can I have her? Now, at that point, she was 16. He was well in his 20s. So she's like, no, you can't buy my daughter. So he announced a very big price. And when she heard that price, it was like, imagine the money signs in my eye. To make matters worse, she didn't accept. You know what she did? She told him, for a little bit more, I will make sure she stays yours. He's like, I don't give a fuck. Do what you got to do. I got the money. So one day, him and her, I mean like his mom's mom, they all went to a voodoo priest. This is where the transaction happened because they did work on his mom so that she remains his. That's why she's the way that she is. And this was like brain altering news for him. After that day, he could never ever look at his father the same. And although he had resentment for his mom, that switched to sympathy. For a second, he wanted to get up and punch the fuck out of his father. But then his cousin would get in trouble. He's very much aware of spiritual stuff because he's not from the U.S., you know? He's from the U.S., but you know what I mean. And so he's very well aware, very well educated. He just didn't know that that's what was happening to his mom because he basically like grew up into it, you know? So for as long as he known his mom, she's always been like that. So as he was out there, he searched for a healer. And he found one. He went with his mom. And funny enough, when his mom got to the healer's place, she refused to go inside. They had to literally carry her and drag her in. At first, he thought it was going to be like a one-day kind of thing. But like with how she was reacting and stuff, the healer was like, I need to keep her for 3 days. That's exactly what they did. Like, dad was looking for them the whole 3 days. He didn't say nothing to him. Blowing up their phone. He didn't say nothing. Probably because the shit is breaking. And he knows what happens if the shit breaks. Wait, 3 days goes past. They go back home. They get home and dad is sick, damn near on his deathbed. Mom is like out of it. But the healer did tell him, if you're going to do this, she has to leave the next day. Like, you guys have to book your flight and leave the country and go back home to the U.S. the next day. Meaning, like, the next day after the 3 days. Thankfully, Jason had his shit together. He booked them tickets. Except now, he's, like, in a tough position because it's like, damn, my dad is sick. But then he's like, no, fuck that nigga. So they get to the U.S. First thing he did was take her to church. And then the church kept her for about a week. And after that, it's like he met an entire new person as his mom. And he loves this version of her. Now, it did take a very long time before she really became a person and not a shell, per se, if you know what I mean. Now, as far as the dad, he never got better. As short as a month, he ended up passing away. The day they left and went back home, he stopped speaking. From there, it was just like, never got better. Jason says he does miss his dad sometimes. However, he has to come to realize that he missed the version that he thought was his dad, not the real man, Because his actions are like inexcusable. It's been about 3 years now and he lives with his mom. She is the most wonderful person in the world, according to Jason. So yeah, that's the story, y'all. Please do not miss the sale this time. And I hope to see you in dance class, okay? All right, I love you.
Maybe wait or do more research before you get Moldavite. I am back with another spooky story. So we're gonna call the person who submitted the story Belle. Belle said about a couple of years ago, she kept seeing videos on TikTok about Moldavite. Everyone was saying it was a powerful crystal and it would transform your life. Some people even joked that it would ruin your life before making it better. Belle at the time felt like she was at a point in her life where things weren't bad, things were relatively good, but they could always be better. Plus, she's like, you know what, it's probably another trend anyway. She's thinking it's probably just another trend, but it doesn't hurt to try. So she ordered a small Moldavite ring from an online crystal shop. When you order these things online, there's a big chance that it's not authentic. But she said the day it arrived, she remembers putting it on immediately. And within seconds, her fingers started tingling. She convinced herself maybe it was just excitement or shit, maybe the crystal's working. She said that same night, she had the most vivid nightmare of her life. She had the worst sleep paralysis and she felt like she was stuck there for a while. And mind you, she can't move. There was someone standing at the foot of her bed just staring at her. When she finally woke up, the finger that the ring was on, her finger looked like it had swelled up. Her finger wasn't swelled up to the point where it hurt. So she basically just kind of moved on, right? Went about her day. Then everything really started happening. 3 days later, Belle got laid off from her job. About a week after that, she went through her nigga phone and found out that he had been cheating on her for about a year now with the same bitch he was telling her not to worry about. She says, by the way, it's always a coworker. Go through your man's phone. Hey, I'm just reading. She got into it with her man so bad that the 4-year relationship crumbled right then and there. Just when she thought things could not get any worse, her landlord suddenly decided not to renew her lease because he wanted to renovate the building. So within a month or so, Belle lost her relationship, her apartment, and her income. She's like, okay, well, maybe the Moldavite is just taking away things that's not meant to serve me. But then her dog got sick. He's never had health problems before. He's relatively a young dog, but overnight he stopped eating and had to stay at the emergency vet for days. And mind you, she just lost her job. She's staying with her parents again, and she's draining whatever little savings she has trying to keep her dog alive. She's like, she understands that Moldavite clears out what no longer belongs in your life. But goddamn, the dog? Why would her dog have to suffer? That's when she decided, you know what? She's just gonna get rid of the ring. But she says she also spent a lot of money on the ring. So why would she just throw it away? So Belle decided that the best course of action would be to gift the ring. So she wrapped it up real nice and decided to gift it to her least favorite cousin. She says, mind you, the cousin doesn't know what Moldavite is, but it's her problem now. And she says she doesn't know if it's related or not. The last time she saw that cousin, she could have sworn she saw her looking out on the side of the road. No, she didn't stop to make sure. But she says, yeah, so like maybe don't buy Moldavite because it ruined her life. Thank you so much for submitting this spooky story. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to submit it to me right here on TikTok or DM me on Instagram. Hit that follow button for more spooky content. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you say anything about my face, I just woke up, bitch. Be gratitude that y'all getting a spooky story today. I'm your favorite Haitian homegirl.